Hi, this is Mike Warner from Work Hard Playlist Hard. You're listening to Your Morning Coffee, the podcast with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From Jeremy Young over at Hypebot, podcaster, writer, and consultant Jay Gilbert's 2026 music predictions.
From Murray Stassen at Music Business Worldwide, global value of music copyright reached $47.2 billion in 2024. That's from a Will Page report.
And from Mandy DeLugdug at Music Business Worldwide, Billboard just made free streams worth more on its U.S. charts. But YouTube is not happy and is pulling its data. Ooh. Well, sounds like YouTube's a little grumpy, Jay. Well, listen, we're glad you're here. It's episode 281, and we're going to start the show right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Well, Jay, I feel the urge to sing a Willie Nelson song on the road again. You have been on the road again, brother.
Well, it was my last trip for the year, and it was just joyful. Travel aside, that's never fun. I think it was Robin Zander who told me one time, I play for free. They pay me to travel.
I charge to travel, yes, and load in my gear.
Yeah, and I get that, but I got to see the Accidentals with a 30-piece orchestra 2 nights in Traverse City, Michigan, and it was just absolutely joyful. Check out their new album. It's called Sonus Borealis, a holiday winter collection. It's really special.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Well, a few things in the news this week that happened to catch our attention. This is from Ozinia Bacon over at CNN. Gen Z's search for decorative collectibles is fueling vinyl sales. So vinyl records, of course, are popular again. But it's not just audiophiles or nostalgic boomers fueling the resurgence.
Right. Gen Z is playing an outsized role in the revival of vinyl sales, which have grown an average of about 18% annually over the last 5 years or so. About 60% of Gen Z say that they buy albums, they buy records. That's according to Future Source Consulting's Audio Tech Lifestyles report.
But Gen Z isn't necessarily buying records for their unique sound. Around 40% of record buyers in the U.S. don't own a turntable, noted James Duvall, principal analyst and head of entertainment over at Future Source Consulting. 40% of record buyers in the U.S. don't own a turntable? Is that right, Jay?
In a word, no, that's not right. It's close. But if you look at Luminate Insights, which we do, I'll give you a few quick stats. You hear that stat all the time that half the people that buy vinyl don't own a turntable. Well, let's not let facts get in the way of a good story. So here's some of the stats from Luminate Insights. 60% of Gen Z, so that's people aged between 16 and 30, 60% of them that buy vinyl own a record player. So over 50%, right? Where it comes to about 50% are millennials, and those are people who are aged 31 to 45 roughly. Those record buyers that are millennials, about half of them own a record player. But the older that you get, the more likely you are, if you're buying vinyl, to own a record player. So 74% of Gen X, that's people 46 to 60. Those record buyers, 74% own a record player, and 87% of baby boomers that buy records, they own a record player.
And again, and we've talked about this so many times, if you would have told me back in, call it 1990, when we were just shoving aside vinyl records to get CDs out, if you would have told me that we would still be talking about that in the years to come, there's just no way I would have believed it. No freaking way. So yet here we are.
Here we are.
All right, another one from the Associated Press and Billboard. TikTok selling U.S. business to 3 American investors, including Oracle and Silver Lake. So TikTok has signed a deal to sell its U.S. business to, again, these 3 American investors, Oracle, Silver Lake, and MGX, ensuring the popular social video platform can continue operating in the U.S. The deal is expected to close on January 22nd. That's according to an internal memo seen by the Associated Press.
Right. Half of the new TikTok U.S. joint venture will be owned by a consortium of investors, like you just mentioned, Oracle, Silver Lake, MGX. Each of them will hold about a 15% share. Another 30% will be held by affiliates of existing ByteDance investors, the current owner, and about 20% will be retained by the China-based ByteDance, and that's according to that memo.
Right. The U.S. venture will have a new 7-member majority American board of directors, the memo said. It will also be subject to terms that protect Americans' data and U.S. national security. So U.S. user data will be stored locally in a system, not surprisingly, run by Oracle.
Yeah, and finally, TikTok's algorithm, that's a secret sauce that powers its addictive video feed, that will be retrained on U.S. user data to, quote, ensure the content feed is free from outside manipulation, end quote. And that's what the memo said. The U.S. venture will also oversee content moderation and policies within the United States. Super interesting.
Indeed. Another piece in Billboard, interestingly, is by Sophie Williams. Bandcamp Fridays scores $19 million boost for indie music scene in 2025. So originally launched as a single-day effort back in March of 2020 to help artists to the start of COVID-19 pandemic as touring revenue collapsed. The recurring event has generated more than $154 million to date. On each Bandcamp Friday, the platform waives its revenue share so that money spent on music goes straight to the creators.
Yeah, I love Bandcamp Fridays. I bought a lot of stuff on Bandcamp Fridays. We've got a new addition to the Your Morning Coffee book club. It's by Brendan Burrell. We just started reading this, you and I both, and I think we're both about halfway through it, and we'll have to talk to Brendan about this. But it's about Tom Schultz from Boston, and the title of the book is Power Soak: Invention, Obsession, and the Pursuit of the Perfect Sound. So this book tells the story of Tom Schultz, an MIT engineer who helped shape the sound of arena rock, and he also took on the most powerful man in the music business.
Yeah, so in the 70s, Tom Schultz built Boston's sound in his basement, fusing engineering precision with soaring melody to create the clean, explosive style that made More Than a Feeling a big, huge hit.
Yeah.
His studio inventions spread to Journey, Def Leppard, and The Cars, bringing his signature guitar tone to many of the defining albums of the time, and those little devices, including the Rockman and, of course, the Power Soak, were just... So here you have a guy who can produce and write and engineer an unbelievable album, and then in his downtime he creates a company that makes these devices for studios and other musicians. It's remarkable.
He plays multiple instruments and plays them well. Keyboards, guitar, etc. So when Tom Schultz refused to hand over his own record, it's called Third Stage, until it met his exacting standards, CBS Records chief Walter Yetnikoff declared war. Royalties were cut off, lawsuits piled up, the band splintered, and Tom Schultz sank further into isolation. Then two rival power brokers, Irving Azoff and David Geffen, entered the fray, racing to pry loose Boston's long-awaited album, which would become one of the last blockbusters of the classic rock era. And Mike, before we hit record, I was telling you I started with Universal when it was called MCA Records back in 88, 89. And I remember when they got this record and we worked this record.
And just how they got that record is part of the story. And it's fascinating. So Power Soak reveals the full inside story of this battle for the first time, drawing on thousands of pages of court filings, internal CBS documents, and new interviews. Journalist Brendan Burrell reveals how Schultz pushed back against the major label power structure and helped arm artists with new tools in their struggle for creative control. The book is out now. I could not put it down last night.
Yeah.
It's unbelievably great. And oh my God, as we said sort of earlier, a couple of guys named David Geffen and Walter Yetnikoff do not come out very well in this book. And so it is fascinating reading though. So, hey, before we get rolling, Jay, I say we thank our sponsors because we are so blessed to have them all this last year helping us put the show on. And including our good friends over at Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing, how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and yes, monetized. Edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Jeremy Young, Hypebot is published and supported by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
Yeah, Bands in Town. Now over 100 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist services platform connecting over 700,000 artists and their super fans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across 4 billion music fans on all platforms.
And that's a big number, Ray. 4 billion. That is a big number. And every week I get to hang out with this guy that had a hellacious travel experience this last week. He's music industry consultant, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups.
Right. And every week I get to do this show with my good friend Mike Etchart, who's a longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group, formerly known as MCA Music Group, where you and I met and shared a lot of lunches together.
We certainly did. Well, let's jump into the stories. The first one from Jeremy Young over at Hypebot, podcaster, writer, and consultant Jay Gilbert's 2026 music predictions. That is you, Jay. That is you. Hypebot's Future Predictions series is back. So join us as they ask the music industry's expert analysts what they think might unfold in the world of music in 2026. In case you don't know, and this is from our friends over at Hypebot, by the way, writing this, Jay Gilbert is a digital marketing innovator. He's pioneered the industry's first digital-only label, and he's run award-winning campaigns for Nirvana, Bob Marley, Kiss, and more. He, of course, is the founder of the newsletter and the podcast Your Morning Coffee, which you are listening to right now, which has over 25,000 subscribers. He's also a consultant and the co-host of 2 other top industry podcasts and a frequent contributor to Hypebot, and he is one groovy dude. So Hypebot asked my brother Jay if he had any predictions for the music industry in 2026. Talk to me, Jay. What do you got?
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words and thank Hypebot. I'd like to thank Hypebot for including me in their predictions each year. And I have so much fun doing this. And we always like to say that even a broken clock is correct twice a day, right? So, but I really think these are going to come close. So here are my 3 predictions for 2026. Number 1, performers will finally get paid when their songs are played on the radio in the U.S. So did you know that when your performance is played on the radio in the United States, you get 0 compensation? Let's look at the song I Will Always Love You. It's written by Dolly Parton. Whitney Houston's version blew up. She, Whitney, got paid nothing for those spins in the United States, only the songwriter. So the American Music Fairness Act, AMFA, requires terrestrial radio stations to pay performers when they play their songs on the radio. It's a $14 billion business on the backs of performers. Digital platforms already pay, and the U.S. is one of a few countries not compensating performers for radio airplay. The others include China, Russia, and North Korea, for example. Everyone knows this is bullshit. No, it won't put any radio stations out of business, Annual fees typically equate to an accounting rounding error. We're talking about a few $100s. So do the right thing, U.S. radio. We're all watching. It's time. The second prediction for 2026 is something, Mike, that you and I talk about almost every week. And this is Suno introducing the GAW, which is GAW, Generative Audio Workstation. And you and I had an AI roundtable recently where we were introduced to the GAW. So we're hearing increasingly more songs, words, and music that were created or assisted by generative AI. Zania Monet became the first AI-powered artist to debut on an Airplay chart this year and is one of several AI-driven acts to chart over the past 3 months, according to Billboard. That growing list includes Breaking Rust, Kane Walker, Child Pets, Galore, Unbound Music, Enly Blue, and Juno Sky. While it's true that there are plenty of generative AI platforms that can create a song from your text prompt, one platform I believe is blazing a new trail, and that's Suno. Top Nashville songwriters are using Suno every day, not to write songs, but to arrange them, record and demo them. Because Nashville songwriters take demos very seriously, often recording them in the style of the artist they hope will cut the track. Nothing is left to chance. With Suno, they can upload their guitar or piano tracks and build from there, auditioning various instrumentation, styles, strings, horns, that sort of thing. In 2026, I predict Suno is going to become this go-to GAW, Generative Audio Workstation, with capabilities we can't even imagine today. And then the final prediction, number 3, limits on ticket scalping profits, they're coming. The ticketing world has taken a lot of heat for high prices, system failures, hidden or junk fees, and an overall lack of transparency. But there's plenty of blame to go around. One problem that is finally getting its day in the sun is ticket scalping, and that's something Mike and I talk about almost every week. Reselling tickets for big profits that the artists and teams putting on the shows don't participate in financially. Another is what's called speculative tickets. This is when a broker sells you a ticket for an event they don't actually possess a ticket for. What could possibly go wrong? It's not a fair fight when a fan is competing with professional ticket brokers assisted by software to buy up the best seats in the house, turn around and flip them for huge profits. So the BOTS Act, that's Better Online Ticket Sales Act, is a step in the right direction, but it really needs to be enforced. So in my humble opinion, there should be a maximum 15% cap over face value for ticket resellers. Sorry, SeatGeek, StubHub, etc. Nothing personal. And big thank you to Jeremy, Bruce, and the stellar team at Hypebot. I appreciate the opportunity here.
Well, I hope you're right about all three. I mean, I'm sure you're going to be right about the GAW, about Suno. But man, it just seems like we have been dealing with the ticket issue and the musicians being paid fairly when they're on the radio. Since we've been doing this. And it's high time that all of these things actually make it happen. So there you go. All right. Well, our next story, it's from our friend Murray Stassen over at Music Business Worldwide. The global value of music copyright reached $47.2 billion in 2024, says a new report by our good friend Will Page. And by the way, we recently sat down with Will to break this report down, so don't miss our upcoming special episode, which is a conversation with Will Page, dropping this coming week. And of course, you can listen as you're heading home for the holidays. It's going to be a good one for sure.
Yeah, we spoke to Will from Spain, as a matter of fact, and we think the world of Will and this report. There's a lot of learnings in there. So the 2024 figure, that $47.2 billion that you just mentioned, Mike, that was up just $2.3 billion, so around 5% over the prior year, according to this report. Growth is slowing, largely because this is the first year where the pandemic effects have vanished.
Right. Well, of that total, $29 billion, or about 61%, came from recorded music revenues, which is up about 5% year over year, while $13.6 billion was brought in by collective management organizations. That's the CMOs, up 8% year over year, and about $4.6 billion in direct publisher income, which actually was down a skosh, 1% year over year. Thus, compositions brought in 39% of the total. So Music Business Worldwide was first to publish Page's Global Value of Music Copyright Report back in 2015, when he calculated the figure at just $25 billion for 2014, making today's $47.2 billion number a near doubling over the past decade.
That is impressive. So over that 10-year period that you just talked about, the three segments grew at dramatically different rates. CMOs expanded by 50%. Labels doubled their revenues, and publishers' direct revenues grew by 112%. The report notes that ICMP has long championed the ability of publishers to license their rights directly, circumventing the constraints of the collective, and this performance supports their argument.
Right. That growth has been driven by streaming's continued expansion and the rise of what Will Page calls glocalization, the phenomenon of domestic market strength reshaping global music economics.
Right. The report also identifies emerging threats and opportunities, from AI music's potential to simultaneously create and destroy value across different sectors, to measure gaps that suggest hundreds of millions of dollars remain uncounted. This is super important. Will Page's analysis presents a more complex picture than simple year-over-year growth figures.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. So here are 5 of the key takeaways from the report. Number 1, the $47.2 billion milestone masks a structural shift in how value is captured. So while the headline figure shows impressive growth over the past decade, Page argues the more significant story lies in where that value is being generated.
So Will Page writes that the globalization of value of copyright reminds us that the big figure that is calculated each year is being allocated across markets differently.
So the report continues. These 3 winners of globalization reminds us that more of that value is staying within their domestic markets as opposed to being repatriated back to international headquarters.
Right. So that shift represents a fundamental departure from the broadcast era. The free market of streaming has achieved what the regulated market of broadcast failed to do: domestic prominence, according to Will Page.
Right. Unlike traditional radio, which often favored international repertoire, streaming platforms have enabled local artists to dominate their home markets while occasionally breaking through to global charts based purely on domestic demand.
So, number 2, K-pop's dominance in Japan is blurring genre boundaries. K-pop has become so dominant in Japan that the genre classification itself is becoming meaningless. Japan is Korea's biggest export market, with 14 of the top 100 artists in Japan this year tagged as K-pop, Will Page writes. The genre of K-pop has overtaken pop in Korea, whereas it's half the size of pop in Japan, yet its streams are now growing twice as fast.
So with BTS's imminent return, Will Page suggests we could see a tipping point where K-pop overtakes pop in Japan. Should this happen, he notes, it raises more questions than answers, especially when it comes to syntax of the genre K-pop.
Right, and number 3, Brazil's domestic scale alone is powerful enough to break artists globally. Brazil's market demonstrates the extreme end of globalization. Will goes on to write that the YouTube Top 100 Artist Chart for Brazil provides a litmus test for globalization. Simply scroll from top to bottom, and you will not see any international artists. No Spanish, nor English language, not even K-pop demon hunters. It's all Portuguese. Yet despite this linguistic isolation, that's easy for you to say, these Brazilian artists are reaching the top of the global charts thanks to only local demand.
Yeah, so number 4, AI music poses an asymmetric threat to the industry. So Page writes, one headwind that needs no introduction is the rise of AI music. The question on everyone's lips, will this be complementary or cannibalistic to the existing $47.2 billion business?
Right, that is the big question. And his answer suggests both outcomes are possible simultaneously. This is where we can revisit our concept of fair division and ask if the commercial prospects of recent deals with Suno and Udio might add value to the B2C, that's business to consumer revenues, but wipe out value from the B2B business, business to business, due to the displacement of production music libraries. So the impact of AI may be asymmetric.
Right. The warning is significant. While the headline $47.2 billion figure might continue growing through consumer-facing AI applications, substantial value could be destroyed in the professional production music sector, creating winners and losers within the same industry ecosystem. And number 5, the industry is missing hundreds of millions in unmeasured markets.
Right. I thought this was really interesting. He says that despite the $47.2 billion figure that you mentioned, representing the most comprehensive measurement yet, Will Page argues significant value remains uncaptured. He says that the most obvious tailwind meanwhile, risks of repetition, but remains salient as ever. Global needs to mean global.
So Will says, of the 196 flags flying outside the United Nations building in New York, our industry yearbooks feature here capture barely a quarter of them. Ceteris paribus, the more we measure, the more value we capture.
Typical Will Page. I like that. China illustrates the scale of the problem. With $1.6 billion in recorded music revenue, it's now ranked 5th in a size by the IFPI and will soon overtake both Germany and the UK. But that's not a complete picture of copyright, he notes.
He writes, industry experts estimate a further 15% should be paid to Chinese publishers, and this isn't being captured in any of the yearbooks. That's almost $250 million currently not being calculated.
Right. He goes on to write that the broader implication is stark. How many more known, unknown examples like this are there? And if we did know and measured these markets accordingly, how much bigger might the global value of music copyright be? This is why global needs to mean global when we measure music copyright.
Good stuff.
Really great stuff.
From our good friend Will Page.
Yeah, and listen to that bonus episode we have coming. He's a character, super smart. We always love having Will on the show.
We certainly do. Well, our final story of the week, this is from Mandy DeLugdug over at Music Business Worldwide. Billboard just made free streams worth more on its U.S. charts. YouTube, however, is still not happy, and it's pulling its data. So YouTube says it will soon stop providing data to Billboard for inclusion in the U.S. charts, ending a partnership that has lasted more than a decade.
Yeah, that decision was announced last week by Leor Cohen, YouTube's global head of music, and it comes one day after Billboard revealed changes to its chart methodology that will actually narrow the weighting gap between paid and ad-supported streams. Under Billboard's current formula for the Billboard 200, one album quote-unquote unit equals 1,250 paid subscription streams or 3,750 ad-supported streams. That's a 1-to-3 ratio.
Well, Billboard's new methodology tightens that ratio to 1 to 2 to 5, with one album unit now equaling 1,000 paid streams or 2,500 ad-supported streams. So the same ratio change is being applied to the Hot 100, by the way. In other words, paid streams will still be weighted more favorably than ad-supported plays, but by a smaller margin than before.
Yet in a statement today, Leor Cohen said that the changes do not go far enough. YouTube wants all streams to be counted equally on Billboard's charts, regardless of whether they come from paid subscriptions or ad-supported services. Leor Cohen said Billboard uses an outdated formula that weights subscription-supported streams higher than ad-supported, and he said that in a statement.
Right. He also said this doesn't reflect how fans engage with music today and ignores the massive engagement from fans who don't have a subscription. He also added, we believe every fan matters and every play should count equally. Therefore, after January 16th, YouTube data will no longer be delivered or factored into the U.S. Billboard charts.
Yeah, Leo goes on to say that we're simply asking that every stream is counted fairly and equally, whether it's a subscription-based or ad-supported, because every fan matters and every play should count. YouTube was first included in the Billboard Hot 100 in February of 2013 and was later added to the Billboard 200 album chart in January of 2020.
So in his statement this week, Cohen directed fans to YouTube's own charts as an alternative to Billboard's list. He said, if you're curious about what music is making waves on YouTube, you can visit our charts. Well, there you go.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I hope they resolve this, Mike. I'm going to reach out to Leo and his team. We'd love to have him on the podcast to talk about some of these things. You and I have talked about this a lot, about what a powerhouse YouTube is for music consumption. Mm-hmm. And, I hadn't thought about it, the ad-supported being worth less than premium streams. And I certainly get the methodology there. But the more I've sort of talked about it and considered it, I'm thinking that maybe Leor is right, that maybe a stream is a stream. And if you're listening to a song, that should count equally and not be weighted. What do you think?
I see his point, absolutely. And I'm like you, I'm kind of starting to agree with his point. So we'll see where that goes. He's got a fair bit of weight to throw around when you're over there heading YouTube music. Yeah. For sure. Well, it is time to wrap up the show. We do want to thank our sponsors, including Hypebot and Bands in Town. Boy, they've been with us for a long time, and we certainly appreciate it. The music is by Licorice Quartet. And by the way, if you do enjoy the show, please tell just one friend. Jay and I would certainly appreciate that. So on behalf of my good friend Jay Gilbert, I'm Mike Etchart. I say thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.